Halfway through a soundcheck in Las Vegas, Elvis stopped. The band froze. A girl, no older than 8, was sobbing in the front row, clutching a cardboard sign too big for her hands. If you love stories where a single act of kindness changes everything, stay with me, because what Elvis did next is something her family never forgot. The first verse of Suspicious Minds rang out in an empty Las Vegas showroom, and then stopped. No one missed a note. Elvis had stopped them. It was the mid-1970s. Inside the International Hotel, rows of red velvet seats sat mostly empty, except for a scattering of crew and a handful of lucky fans who'd slipped in early. The air hummed with low amp hiss, and the faint rattle of lighting rigs being adjusted overhead. Stage lights spilled across the polished floor, throwing long shadows. Elvis stood at center stage, white jumpsuit half-zipped, a blue scarf draped casually over his neck. He'd been swaying to the rhythm when something in the front row caught his eye. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, sat pressed against her mother's side. Her hands clutched a cardboard sign so large it bent in the middle. "I love you, Elvis." Her small shoulders shook. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't calling out, she was crying. The kind of quiet, shaky crying you try to hide. Witnesses recall Elvis lowering the microphone slowly, eyes locked on her. He raised one hand toward the band without looking away. The guitars faded, the drums cut off mid-beat. For a moment, the only sound in the vast showroom was the girl's unsteady breathing. He stepped down from the stage platform, boots tapping against the metal riser. The crew froze where they stood. Technicians stopped coiling cables. Even the ushers near the back leaned forward. Elvis bent at the waist so he was eye level. "What's your name, honey?" His voice was gentle but carried easily in the quiet. She spoke, barely more than a whisper. Whatever she said made him smile, not the big stage-ready smile, but a small private one. He nodded once, as if he'd made a decision right there. Behind him, the band waited for a cue that didn't come. Some in the room later said you could feel the shift, the sense that whatever was about to happen wasn't part of the rehearsal. He rested a hand briefly on the edge of her seat, said something only she and her mother could hear, and then he turned back toward the stage. And that's when he did something no one in that room expected. What happened next wasn't in any set list, and it's the reason this moment is still told decades later. Elvis turned, gave the band a small nod, but not for the song they'd been rehearsing. Instead, the opening chords of "Love Me Tender" floated through the empty row. The tempo was slow, deliberate, every note stretching in the stillness. He stepped down again, this time bringing the microphone with him. The chord trailed behind, pooling in lazy loops at his white boot. He crouched in front of the girl, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. Her cardboard sign now sat in her lap. Her grip had loosened, and she wiped her cheeks with the edge of her sleeve. Her mother's hand hovered near her shoulder, trembling slightly. Elvis began to sing, not to the empty showroom, not to the handful of staff, but to her alone. "Love me tender, love me sweet." His voice was softer than in concert, warm enough to make the air around them feel smaller, more private. The hum of the amps became a backdrop to something else. The faint squeak of his leather boots shifting as he leaned in, the muted sniffle from the girl as she tried to compose herself. Crew members along the back wall exchanged glances. Even in Vegas, where Elvis's shows were legendary for surprises, this was different. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't scripted, it was personal. Some say, though no one could ever fully confirm, that he swapped a lyric, shaping it just for her. If you listen closely to the bootleg tape a stagehand claimed to have made, there's a subtle change, a line that feels like it belongs to one person only. As he reached the final verse, the girl's tears slowed. A small smile broke across her face, cautious at first, then bright. She tucked her chin down, as though the attention was almost too much. When the last note faded, Elvis didn't stand right away. He reached up, untied the blue scarf from around his neck. The silk caught the stage light, a flash of deep color against his whites. Without a word, he draped it gently around her shoulders. Her mother gasped quietly. The girl's hands came up to touch the scarf, fingers curling into the fabric like it might disappear if she let go. From the scattered audience, crew, a few hotel staff, maybe half a dozen early fans, came a round of applause. It wasn't loud, but it was heartfelt, echoing just enough to fill the quiet room. Elvis smiled at her once more, stood, and walked back toward the stage. The band was waiting, instruments in hand, ready for his cue to resume rehearsal, but he didn't pick up where they'd left off. He set the microphone on its stand, gave one brief wave to the room, and walked straight off stage. No explanation, no announcement. Just gone. Minutes later, the girl and her mother would be led somewhere few fans ever got to see. The soundcheck was over, but for one little girl the night was just beginning. An usher approached her and her mother, speaking softly, motioning toward a side aisle. The girl still clutched the blue scarf, knuckles white against the fabric. They followed, stepping past rows of empty seats, and into a narrow hallway, where the air felt warmer, heavier. The faint scent of hairspray mixed with cigarette smoke drifted from somewhere deeper inside. The hum of the showroom was replaced by the muffled thump of bass through the walls. Another act rehearsing in a nearby room. They were told to wait near a door with a brass plate marked private. The mother smoothed her daughter's hair, still wide-eyed, still silent. Down the hall, two security guards spoke in low tones, occasionally glancing their way. Then, the door opened. Elvis stepped out, hair still damp as if he'd just rinsed off the sweat from rehearsal. He wore a fresh shirt, black with a high collar, and carried something under his arm. It was a framed 8x10 photo of him mid-performance, microphone tilted, mouth open in song. He walked toward them with an easy smile. When he reached them, he crouched so his eyes met the girl's. The hallway seemed to narrow around them. "What's your name again, darlin'?" he asked. She told him, her voice just above a whisper. He nodded, like he was committing it to memory. "You comin' to see the show tonight?" he asked. The girl glanced at her mother, then shook her head. We can't," her mother said softly. "It's too much money." For a moment, Elvis didn't say anything. He glanced toward his road manager, who had just stepped out of the dressing room. There was a quick exchange of looks. Then Elvis said, low enough for only a few to hear, "She will not." The road manager gave a short nod and disappeared back into the room. The mother's lips parted, speechless. The girl clutched the scarf tighter. Elvis handed her the framed photo. "Thought you might like this," he said. She took it carefully, as though it might break. The hallway filled with the sound of footsteps as a crew member returned, not with one ticket, but with two. Front row, center. The mother's hands shook as she accepted them. "You sit right up front," Elvis told the girl. "I'll see you." He stood, gave a polite nod to the mother, and turned to head back toward his dressing room. But before the door closed, he looked over his shoulder and smiled. That same small private smile from the soundcheck. What they didn't know was that the real surprise wouldn't be waiting at the door of the showroom. It would happen in the middle of the show, with the whole crowd watching. The next time she saw Elvis, he was under a wall of lights, and 2,000 people were watching. That evening, the International Hotel showroom was alive with movement. Ushers guided guests to their seats, the rustle of programs mixing with the clink of glasses. The smell of perfume drifted through the air, tangled with the faint bite of whiskey. Red velvet curtains framed the stage, hiding the instruments and amplifiers that would soon roar to life. Front row center, the little girl sat with her mother. Her hair had been brushed smooth, and she wore the same blue scarf draped over her shoulder. The framed photo from earlier rested safely at their hotel room, but the tickets, now torn in half, were proof she was exactly where Elvis promised she'd be. The lights dimmed. A wave of cheers rolled through the room. From the wings, Elvis strode out, guitar slung over his shoulder, and the band launched into CC Rider. Spotlights chased him across the stage, catching the silver accents on his white jumpsuit. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned the space, but every so often, His eyes flicked toward the front row. Song after song filled the room. Between numbers he cracked jokes, took scarves from around his neck, and handed them to women near the stage. The crowd was in his hands. Halfway through the set, during a brief pause, Elvis stepped forward. He scanned the front row and found her instantly. Dropping to one knee, he held out a small guitar pick. Into the microphone, he said with a grin, "Y'all, this is my little friend from earlier today." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed like tiny lightning bolts. The girl's cheeks flushed deep pink as she accepted the pick. Tucking it carefully into her palm, she covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed. Before peeking back up at him, he gave her a wink, stood, and launched into the next song. But as the band played, something else happened. From the side of the stage, a crew member slipped into the aisle and tapped the girl's mother on the shoulder. In his hands was a small square box wrapped in plain brown paper. He placed it gently on her lap and said, "From Elvis." The mother looked stunned, glancing at her daughter, then at the box. She didn't open it. Not yet. The music was too loud, the moment too surreal. Through the rest of the show, the box sat untouched, its presence pulling at their attention even as Elvis powered through his hits. Burning Love, Can't Help Falling in Love. Each song only heightened the tension. When the final notes rang out and Elvis left the stage to a standing ovation, the girl turned immediately to her mother. The applause still thundered as her mother peeled back the paper, careful not to tear it too fast. Inside, beneath the lid, was something no fan in that showroom had ever received before, and it would keep this night alive for the rest of her life. The paper tore back, the lid lifted, and the room around them seemed to fall away. Inside the box lay a child-sized acoustic guitar. Its wood gleamed under the showroom's fading lights, a faint scent of lacquer still fresh. The strings were new, catching the glow as her mother tilted it slightly. Tucked beneath the strings was a folded sheet of paper. Her mother unfolded it carefully, smoothing the creases with trembling hand. In a looping blue script, the words read, "You'll always have a seat in the front row, Elvis." The little girl stared at the guitar, her fingers hovering above it, but not touching. She looked at her mother, eyes wide, as though asking permission to believe it was real. Around them, people who had witnessed the handoff began to notice. A man in the next row leaned over to read the note. A woman nearby put her hand over her mouth. Whispers spread like ripples. He gave her a guitar. Elvis gave her a guitar. Her mother's eyes brimmed with tears. She leaned down and kissed the top of her daughter's head. The girl finally reached out and touched the smooth wood, tracing the curve of its body with slow, careful movements. The usher who had led them backstage earlier appeared again, smiling warmly. "Hang on to that," he said soft. "It's worth more than you know." In the days that followed, the story traveled quickly through the hotel staff. Bartenders told it to guests at the lounge. Housekeepers passed it along in the elevators. By the end of the week, even people who hadn't been there swore they knew someone who had. Some say Elvis had done similar gestures before, a scarf here, a kiss on the cheek there, but nothing quite like this. A guitar, personalized with a promise. That was different. That was a memory built to last. The guitar went home with them, carefully carried through the airport in her mother's arms. Once in their living room, it was placed on a wall hanger just above the family's sofa. The scarf hung beside it, still holding the faint, sweet, spicy scent of Elvis's cologne. And there it stayed, untouched. Not a single string was strummed. Her mother told visitors, "It's not for playing, it's for keeping." Years later though, that guitar would come down from the wall just once, and when it did, the reason would bring the story full circle. Decades passed, but the scarf never left its place, and the guitar came down only once. It happened on her wedding day. By then the little girl from the showroom was a grown woman. She wore a simple white dress, and before walking down the aisle she asked her mother for the guitar. Together they carried it into the ceremony, setting it on a stand near the altar. No one touched it. It was there as a reminder of kindness, of promises kept. In an interview years later, she told a local paper how that night in Las Vegas had helped her through the hardest times of her childhood. She spoke about the illness that had kept her home from school for months, and how remembering Elvis kneeling down in front of her made her feel stronger. "He didn't just sing to me," she said, "he saw me." The scarf still hung beside the guitar in her living room. For years it held the faint trace of his cologne, a detail she swore was true, even if no one else could quite smell it. The framed photo Elvis had given her on that first day sat on the mantel, the corner slightly bent from being carried through the airport all those years ago. Her family kept the ticket stub from that night, framed and matted in deep blue. It was placed right under the guitar, so anyone visiting their home would know the two belonged together. When the story and the photograph of the guitar with Elvis's handwritten note eventually surfaced online, it spread quickly. Fans shared it across forums, social media, even news sites. Some said it was proof that in the whirlwind of fame, Elvis had never lost sight of the people who loved him. Others just said it made them smile, that for a few minutes, they felt like they were there, watching the king of rock and roll pause everything for a little girl in the front row. In the blur of spotlights and screaming crowds, it wasn't the biggest stage moments that lasted. It was the quiet ones, the kind where someone chooses to stop to see you, and to make you feel like the only person in the room. If this moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop a room. And tell me, what's the smallest act someone's done for you that you'll never forget?